Terminator Zero is the latest Netflix animated show. It's part of the Terminator franchise and it's also an anime, like an actual anime made by Japanese studio. It's not made by Western studios like Korra or Avatar, The Last Airbender or Arcane or Blue Eye Samurai. It's made by an actual Japanese studio, the studio being Production IG, most famously and notably known for Ghost in the Shell. Here are my expectations before going into this show. I personally thought it was going to be a dull, repetitious show of the Terminator movies in anime form. My expectations were really low. But in reality, this show is awesome. Yes, there are ideas, scenes that are very heavily inspired or just taken out of the previous Terminator movies. But it's also very original and inventive because it expands on the lore and world building of this Terminator franchise. In short, it goes deep into themes and topics it wants to explore, or even themes and topics that the Terminator movies couldn't go further into explore because they didn't have the time to go into it. Here's a quick plot synopsis. Malcolm Lee, a scientist working at Cortex Industries in 1997, created an AI called Kokoro that rivals that of Skynet. He has dreams, or nightmare actually, of Judgment Day before it even happens, so he sought out for Kokoro's help to prevent it from happening. Oh yeah, he has a family too, and a Terminator as well as another human was brought back in time for the same purpose, to get to Malcolm Lee, and this ties into his family because they become very integral to the story. Let's start with the good. It expands our knowledge of this Terminator franchise or universe. It expands further on the consequence of time travel and how exactly it works. It even explains further details left out of the movies. Why on earth did Skynet cause Judgment Day and all that? This ties to a grander scheme of humanity and our own history and how machines and AI view us. And it's also coming from a very fresh perspective. For example, there are no Connor, so no Sarah Connor, no John Connor, there's no T-800, no Arnold Schwarzenegger, no T-1000 and all that. It's not happening in Los Angeles. In fact, it is happening with a new set of characters and it's set in Japan. Even the Terminator we see is different. The show is going for very big concepts and very mature and deep themes. Ideas it really makes me want to watch the show again to understand better, as I clearly missed out on a couple of things or didn't fully grasp what the characters were saying in the first viewing. The action is pretty cool. Yes, it's very violent, it's very gruesome. There are hands being ripped off and faces being exposed, bodies burnt to the bones. The show does not hold back at all. There's a lot of actions that characters do which makes us, as the audience, question their morals and ethics. I'll get to that in a moment. But first we need to talk about the moments of moral dilemmas that characters face in this show, and you actually feel the tension in them. It's not just once, it happens more than once in this show. The story expands our own perception of human evolution and whether we are worthy to be saved or whether we should just face Judgment Day as we deserve it. Also, I really enjoyed how they dealt with time travel here. Time travel is not just done in a straight linear line where you can go back in time and then fix everything and everything is fine. No, you actually create a different timeline when you travel back in time. So it doesn't affect your own timeline that you travel from, but it affects the timeline that you travel to, because that's a different timeline already. So I really like how they presented it in a ZEC format. Moreover, there is no hero in this show per se, but characters just doing what they think is the right thing to do. Which brings me back to my earlier point that it makes the audience question their morals and ethics. Sometimes these decisions will leave your mouth agape and eyes widened. The lines between good and bad is more or less nebulous in this show. Last but not least, I want to mention the soundtrack. It is awesome. Like every time the soundtrack comes, it gets you amped up. It gets you hyped up. Yes, it is quite similar to the original Terminator soundtrack. There are some beats here and there that really reminds you of those movies. But still, it is very cool and awesome. Now let's get to my drawbacks. I only have one big drawback, and that is that there's a lot of nods and references to the previous movies or previous Terminator franchises. Now, if you do it to a certain level, it is fine. But if you do it way too much, then it becomes a bit derivative. For example, there's the Terminator on his bike. Wow, it reminds me of the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the first movie or the second movie. And he also has the Terminator and the police to get to the children, but in the first movie it was Sarah Connor and there was someone else there to save her. But in this movie also there's someone else to save the children. So when you do it too much, it feels kind of derivative, you know. Earlier I only mentioned I had one drawback, but now I'm remembering a second one, and that is the Terminator's terrible aiming. In the very beginning of the first episode, there was a scene where the Terminator was holding a machine gun and he could miss her. He could miss the character in shooting her, like with the machine gun. Like, what is he, the stormtrooper now? No, he's still a Terminator. Come on, man. He has to be a better shot. Honestly, I think this is a solid show that goes deeper into the lore of the universe. The deep introspection and mature themes really reminded me of my experience watching Dark, another Netflix show which just so happens to be a masterpiece. If you haven't watched it, definitely go watch it. And I think that also added to my enjoyment of this show. It's a solid entry into this franchise. I'm going to give this show an 8 out of 10. Hopefully we get a season 2 so that a lot of the ideas mentioned in season 1 gets a payoff, a nice satisfying payoff in the next season. I can't wait for it, honestly. That's the end of my video. If you like this video, click the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe to my channel. See you guys next time. You guys are always the best.